This year is the year of the Bible, as is most years in the last 3 years. I think I've made it through most of it in different pieces and orders. So hopefully this year I'll be able to string it all together. And it starts the beginning of both Testaments, Genesis 1 and 2, Matthew 1. And what I really like about Genesis 1 is it's where God creates the earth. And every day he's got a set task and assignment. And at the end of every day, he completes that and he looks back on it and says it was good. And these are monumental tasks like creating day and night, creating the expanse, heaven and earth, vegetation, all these huge things. And a lot of times I get through the day and I kind of wonder what I've accomplished. And sometimes I take on these monumental projects where I might only complete 90% of it and I move on to something else without ever fully completing it. So I think a lesson for me here is to get things from point A to point B and be able to appreciate that progress and look back at it at the end of the day and say it's done and move on the next day and continue on starting with something new. And one thing I've learned from the last couple of years of reading the Bible is I've learned to be okay questioning things critically. Where at first I sort of thought of it was like, oh no, don't do that. Just have blind faith and don't question anything. But I've allowed myself to continue to research and question things. Like after I read this paragraph, I take a step back. So there's some creator or a spirit or a person or a dimension that was able to take all these things from vast void of emptiness and put them together to create this perfect earth. And I think step back and say, is that realistic? Do you really believe that? And I think critically, and I start researching and going into astrophysicists and scientific theory. And what I do believe is that with what they know, with all the limitless possibilities and infinite expanse out there, that it is almost, if not certain, more likely than it is unlikely or even very close to being certain that this is true. And the reason I believe that is that they continually change these scientific theories where at first it was we were taught the Big Bang, then there was a Big Bang before the Big Bang, and then they change that around and say, well, it's continually a continual series of infinite Big Bangs, and then there's string theory. It's like they're really just making stuff up. It's more unbelievable than what scientists could say religion is, because there was a debate between science and religion between Lawrence Krauss, theoretical astrophysicist, and a Christian theologian. I think it was William Craig, and they went back and forth. And the scientific argument was basically that we, for so long, would just use religion as a placeholder for things that we couldn't explain in science. And I sort of feel like it's the other way around, where is we're just saying that we can explain things with science that we can't yet explain with religion, or something like that. So the way I look at it is that it's more realistic that these things happen and we just don't have the mental intelligence to comprehend and understand them, which Neil deGrasse Tyson explained that even if we took the smartest monkey on this earth, that monkey is never going to be able to do the most simple things that a human could do. It might be able to stack some boxes and get a banana, but it's never going to be able to make a grocery list, go to the store, get 3 things on the list, and drive home. And most likely there's another element or dimension out there, especially when you're looking at things like someone who has the ability to create the earth and the earth around us, that we are being given this explanation and these instructions, and we just don't have the ability to understand them, which is why they've been broken down into some of the most seemingly simple stories that are potentially easier for us to understand and digest and comprehend. So Genesis 2, there were 2 trees, which was the big takeaway there for whatever reason. I always just remember the one tree being there, and it was the bad tree. But I looked into it a little bit further. There are 2 trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then in Matthew 1, as I did some research on this, it is most widely believed that Matthew and Luke used the Gospel of Mark as a foundation. And even though Matthew comes first, they put it first because it had the most in-depth genealogy at the beginning, where it has 3 groups of the 14 different generations. So they decided that that would be the beginning of the New Testament. And Mark starts off with the baptism of Jesus, where Matthew makes it clear that there's the genealogy and lineage there. And what I liked in Matthew 1 was the scripture being fulfilled. I believe it was Isaiah 4:17. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Whenever I see those prophecies being fulfilled, I always like to go back and see exactly where they are in the Old Testament, because it sort of makes me think that they were looking back on the Old Testament, sort of how we would be interpreting and reading the New Testament. So you go back to Isaiah 7:14, and behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. So I haven't figured out yet why they didn't name him Emmanuel and they named him Jesus. So, but that's just one of those things where I'll just continue to research, and it continues to affirm my faith in religion.